This is an 1872 Wheeler & Wilson half-case low-bed sewing machine, number 3, model number 3, as I said, from 1872. And I have been sewing with it. I made a pin cushion with it, and I've had some problems with it. So this video is going to be a correction video, and it's also going to be a video showing you how I had to access the glass presser foot insert after I broke it. As you can see, I left a note on the machine, not only what I've done, but also what would need to be done. This machine may be going to one of my brothers, and so I like to leave notes like that with what's been done to the machine, what it needs, if anything, with even my own machines, so that if I'm not using them for a couple of weeks or a month and then I go to use them, I know exactly where I left off. Let's put some thread on here first, and I'll tell you what one of my corrections is. I had done a video on sewing with this machine, and Miller from the Wheeler & Wilson Yahoo group email list told me I had stated a couple of things just a little bit off. So this is where your thread goes, on the spool pin in the back. It then comes underneath this thread guide right here, and there is a slot for it to go through the thread guide, and then it comes up. And my error in my other video had been, it sounded like I was referring to this right here as a disc, or in fact I don't remember what I called it, but what it is a pulley. I think I may have called it a wheel, and this is a spring. The shaft that this sits on mine is bent. It had an accident at some point, but it does work, and this is a thumb screw that tightens or loosens the amount of tension on the spring, which changes how quickly or how slowly the wheel turns. And so we have come up through that thread guide, and we are around the wheel and headed back toward the needle. And you don't want to get your thread tangled like that. But that was one of my corrections, was that I had not referred to that as a tension pulley, which is what it is. And I'm going to be not sewing with this machine, and I'll explain that in a couple of minutes. But you see the wheel move as I pull on the thread. So now the thread would go through this thread guide here, and if I had a needle in here, it would go through this hole right here. There is a hole there, right here, and then down to the needle, and the needle would thread from the left to the right. Now, my other correction I'll show you first. This is the bobbin area, and there were a couple of things that I had just stated incorrectly. This is called the bobbin holder right here, and I'm going to loosen it and remove it, and the bobbin is going to fall out. In my other video, at first I thought that just this being held in place, the bobbin holder being in place, was how the bobbin tension was placed on the bobbin, but I was wrong. The bobbin, when it's sitting in there, when the bobbin thread is picked up, it will come across this little brush right here. This is a bracket, and that's a brush. And I don't know how this got involved with the hook, but let's get it out of there. so here is the brush at the end of this bracket. And also in my other video, I had found a screw. And I'm going to turn this. And I think that you can see the screw right down there. And I thought then, well, maybe that's how I adjust how the bobbin sits in there and how loose it is. And what it turns out that Miller found out that adjusts is the placement of the bracket for the brush. In other words, I think if I completely loosened that screw, from what Miller says, the brush could rotate around the hook. I think this is where it's supposed to be, so I haven't done that. And I've tightened it back up because I had loosened it once or twice. So the other thing I had wrong was I had thought, this is the bobbin holder, and this is considered the front of it, which goes in toward the bobbin. I had thought this was a forged piece of metal that was all one big piece, and it isn't. This is threaded, and by turning that, adjusting that, you change how close in the bobbin is held. So I have actually adjusted that since I first sewed with this machine, and where I have it now, instead of putting the bobbin in, putting the bobbin holder in, and then backing it off again and tightening it down, because I've adjusted that little piece in the front, when I push this in and put the screw in and tighten it up, the bobbin is where it's supposed to be. And so the corrections here were the screw on the base there moves the brush bracket, and the rod that sticks out from the front of the bobbin holder adjusts how far in or out the holder is and how tight the bobbin is. And bobbin tension is caused when the thread is dragged against this brush. It comes up, grabs it like that, pulls it against the brush. So those are my corrections. Now the other day I started to sew something with this machine. I don't have a needle in it now. And I was winding a bobbin because it was a project that I was starting, and I was going to do everything from start to finish with one project. I did have a needle in at the time. I had the presser foot up, and I was winding the bobbin. For some reason on this machine, I think there's a little bit too much play in the needle arm. But whether I wasn't paying attention, whether I had it wrong, the needle is now bent at the tip. And these are curved needle machines. And you can see that there is a hole right in the middle of that glass insert. And the needle being curved, it curves toward the back, and it has to go exactly through the center of that little hole in order for the machine to work. And I had heard about the glass inserts sometimes breaking, and I was happily winding my bobbin, and all of a sudden I happened to glance over and there were little pieces of glass around. And what I had done, luckily I stopped, the needle arm was hitting the glass, and it was hitting the glass in such a way that it chipped off pieces on the top. It also, and it's lined up now, I'd have to have something behind there for you to see it better. It's lined up now, but what it also did was push it halfway out of that metal foot frame. Let me put some fabric behind it. And you can see that it's straight now. But when this happened earlier, and that it's going to fall down, this half of the glass insert was falling down out of the foot. So this machine belonged to my father, and of course me breaking it was very upsetting. So I took a couple of days, I thought about it, and then I asked on the Wheeler and Wilson Yahoo group email list, how do I get the presser foot off of there so I can think about fixing it? And I'm going to show you now how I get the presser foot off of there, just in case this happens to you. We're not going to sew with this machine anymore. Like I said, I think this has too much play in it, and I'm not sure how to fix that. And I think that because it belonged to my father, it's better to just leave it as one of his antiques. But in the meantime, I can show you how you have to remove, if you decide to remove the presser foot, how you have to do it. And these instructions are again from Miller. And I'm going to turn, I have a light attached to my hat, which hopefully is going to fill in if there isn't enough light to show you the back. Because this screw right here is going to be loosened. It's going to be taken off all the way. And a few minutes ago, this was very, when I did this the first time, it was very tight. Trying to find if I have something to point with, and I don't. Let me grab some scissors. And right here is a little notch. The grayish area you see there is where paint chips came off when I did this. The machine is very old, and this is another reason why I'm not going to keep doing this to this machine. But right here is a notch, and I put a screwdriver there after I removed the top screw, and I was able to pry this up. It probably hadn't been removed in a long time, if it had ever been removed. I don't know the history of the machine. So what you have to do to remove the presser foot completely is to remove the presser foot arm. And I used a heavy-duty screwdriver to remove that. My small screwdriver that I use for a lot of things just wasn't strong enough, and I thought I was going to break the screwdriver. And this bolt is about 1.5 inches long. So that's the first thing you do, is remove this. And as I said before, it didn't lift up easily the first time. And it's not lifting up easily the second time. So here's the notch. And this screwdriver is fine. That screwdriver is fitting right into the notch. And by just turning the screwdriver, it'll lift up. And then it comes right off of there. And I truly appreciate Miller and his knowledge, because I would have been lost without him knowing how to do this. So what I am doing is gently pulling this up. And this is what you have to be careful of. As I'm doing this, the presser foot is hitting the needle arm. I'm going to put the camera down and take it off carefully. So there is the presser arm, I guess. And this is the presser foot. And like I said, this glass was all tilted down not too long ago. And it's easy to remove this. There isn't a lot that can break except the glass. The first thing you do is you unscrew this and you remove this little tabbed washer underneath and behind it. That tabbed washer is what keeps the presser foot up or down. So I'm going to remove that screw and that tabbed washer. And you want to remember that when you put that back on, you can see the tabbed washer is right behind the presser foot to the right. That is the direction it goes in, with the tab to the right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the presser foot down and out. And there are two little metal tabs that fit in this slot and in the slot just like it on the back side. And I'm going to pull the whole thing down and out. There will be a spring inside here. There is a spring that sits on the post for the presser foot. The first time I did that, I had to yank the presser foot quite a bit. And I think because this is glass, even now I'm thinking this is very delicate. But it is glass that is hard enough to sit within two metal toes of a presser foot. And this one, if I do have it back in there correctly, that's about a 32nd of an inch that it's extended down below the toes. So my next problem, as I said, this was all crooked. It wasn't quite all the way out, but it was coming out, and I wanted to get it back in instead of out. So on the presser foot, you can see there's, if I put it over here, on the metal frame toward the back, in this case toward the left, the rounded edge of glass, right behind the rounded edge of glass on the left of it, is a small hole. And it's actually a small hole with a slot. And so my first thought was a very small screwdriver. You see, it's actually a small hole with a slot. That a very small screwdriver might be able to pry the two metal toes open enough to have the glass slide back in. And that didn't work, and I was getting a little nervous about how rough did I want to be with this. So let me show you what I ended up using. This is an antique crochet hook. You could probably use a modern one too, but I used this antique one. It was already bent, and I figured, well, it seems to be the right tool. And what I did, and I can't really do it again the way I did it because I don't want to loosen it. Let's see if I can. Now that's a little unconventional, but I'm going to stick that right there for a minute and show you what I did. I took the crochet hook and I put it in the hole with the slot, and I kept pushing it through until the two metal toes of the foot spread apart just enough to push the glass back into place. And I actually had to push, the crochet hook was about in up to here, so I had to put a little bit of pressure, and I figured the worst that was going to happen was that the glass was going to fall out instead of going back in. So that is how I put the leverage on the two toes to get them to just spread apart enough for me to push the glass back into place. So now I think I do have it the way it was before. And the reason this is important, like I said, is if the needle doesn't go down through that hole exactly, because it's a curved needle, if it doesn't go through that hole exactly, the needle is going to bend like the needle I had in there did, or it's going to break, or it's going to break the glass of the foot. So now I'm going to reassemble everything the way it's supposed to go. And as I said, I'm not going to use this machine for sewing. This is the needle arm, the needle bar, I guess, would be called. Now, I don't know what this does, and I haven't checked to see if I can tighten it from the back. It's on, the main shaft of the machine. But I did notice when I was sewing that this would move after, say, a 5-inch seam. This would be moving. and it would move to the left, and then the needle would fall down further. So if I manually move it a little bit to the right, the needle would stay up a little. And that's where I know it's time for me to stop, because I'm not sure what that's doing. I'm not sure why this is loose, and I don't know enough about this machine to keep sewing with it. As I found out, if I had known that the needle was going to hit the glass the way it was, then I wouldn't have been doing what I was doing. So I think in my case with this machine, it's better to keep it as an antique. And they're fun machines to work on. They really are fun machines to work on. But I think, like I said, in my case, this one is going to be retired. And what I'll do is, after I put these pieces back together, I'll just show you that they are back on the machine, and that it is easy to take this part off, remove the presser foot, and then put it back together. I have the spring back on the post of the presser foot, and I'm pushing it up into the channel that it goes in, lining up those metal tabs like that, and then I'm going to put the tabbed washer back on, and in this case, with the way this is sitting now, the tab would go toward the back, and then I'm going to screw this back on the top, and that is putting the presser foot back on the machine. Now, before I put the arm back on, if you can notice that little metal tab that is in the slot right above the foot, I have the presser bar up, so this is the presser foot in the up position, and that tab is halfway up the channel. Now I'm going to leave it like that while I put the arm back on. And the arm goes back on much easier than it came off. You just place it back in place. There are a couple of ridges built up that it sits on, and now all I have to do is put that screw back into the top of it. And that's the screw that I just replaced right there. And you might have to push down on it a bit to get it to go back in, to start to go back in, but it does grab and goes in easily. And because I have the presser lifter up, that's where the foot is sitting when I'm done putting it back together. So now, because this machine is going to be put away, I'm going to lower the presser lifter, and I'm going to move the machine, the belt, so that the arm comes down. And I'm probably going to put another piece of fabric on top up here. The case top doesn't close unless the arm is down. But from now on, I think that putting fabric both above and below the glass won't hurt. And then I'll put the bobbin back in the bobbin case, and we will just take it out when we want to look at it.